The word, the word. Switch the bracelet on. The word, the word. The word, the word. Switch the bracelet on. The word, the word. The word, the word. Switch the bracelet on. The word, the word.
Good evening. Welcome along to the Word on Blake 7 podcast. We are here again. Sad to say no Dave tonight. Dave is at a prior engagement. He has sent a video along. And who is Dave, if you're tuning in for the first time? Well, ultimately, Dave is the person who doesn't like Blake 7 on this platform. The rest of us are all Blake 7 fans, have been for many, many years. And Dave is the non-Blake 7 fan who is agreed to watch all 4 series, and at the end of it, we're hoping to persuade him maybe that it's not as bad as he first thought. But as always, we welcome our panel. It is Neil, Nick, and Lynn. How are you doing, guys?
Very well, thank you.
All good.
All good, thank you.
Good stuff. Good to see you. And we are looking today at Series A, Episode 5, The Web, which was transmitted Monday, the 30th of January, 1978, and it was directed by Michael Bryan. And this one has quite an interesting feel to it. I've got to be perfectly honest. But as always, if you've got a bit of a spoiler, if you don't like a spoiler, put your fingers in your ears, because I always go through the episode first. So, after a very short time on the Liberator, Kali has already attempted to sabotage the ship. However, her sabotage attempt appears to have brought severe injury upon herself, and although she doesn't give any outward signs, the crew conclude that she must be suffering intense pain. The sabotage Liberator rushes out of control through space until it's trapped in a web surrounding an unknown, unnamed planet. The crew makes several unsuccessful attempts to free the Liberator from the web until the drain on the energy banks becomes too great to permit escape. Jenna begins to speak in a strange voice and relays to Blake an instruction to land the ship. Instead, he teleports down to the planet alone. Blake meets what appears to be the survivors of a centuries-old experimental project in the forbidden field of genetic engineering, and the experiment was run by outlawed members of Kali's people, the Oranos, who have used their telepathic powers to communicate with her and thus force her to bring the ship to their planet. They have created 2 types of beings, one humanoid and apparently intelligent, the other, the Decimers, a race of machine animals created to undertake basic menial tasks. However, the Decimers appear to have got out of control. They are able to breed and are now breeding in emotions and violent habits which were never programmed into them originally. The 2 genetically engineered people on the planet are under the control of a withered humanoid suspended in liquid who seems to contain the memories of the 6 original members of the experimental expedition. He wishes to have his energy banks replaced, after which he promises to clear a way through the web, but he also reveals that he plans to use the energy to wipe out the Decimers. Blake objects to this on moral grounds. Avon teleports down with the energy reserves, and Blake realizes that he's teleported to an area thick with Decimers. Fearing for his safety, and rather than teleporting him back to the ship, Blake takes the 2 humanoids out with him to search for Avon. Whilst the research project remains unguarded, the Decimers begin an attack, and Blake attempts to negotiate with the humanoids, but without success. They are marched back to the dome, and the new power sources put in place. The Decimers attack overpowers the Oranar, and Blake and Avon use the power source to destroy the web, and the Liberator escapes just ahead of a group of Federation pursuit strips. And that comes, as always, from the Bible, the Blake 7 program guide, written by Tony Atwood. So, Neil, as always, we go around the board and get people's feelings on various parts of this show. So, first of all, the episode itself, the storyline, give us your views on it, Neil.
It gets a lot of flack, doesn't it? I think the web. Is that justified? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. It's a single plot line episode. It does start the series obsession with Kali being overtaken by anything that's near her, fundamentally, that has any kind of telepathic ability. And I find that a little disappointing. And we've only had Kali there for a bit of an episode where she first appeared as you know, that freedom fighter in Time Squad, and we're already on to her being taken over by whatever's nearby. So the erosion of the start of her character it begins straight away, really. So that's a bit disappointing for the episode, I think. It's got a deeply disturbing narrative behind it, this episode, about genetic experimentation being used to create oppressed beings, fundamentally, seemingly just for experimentation, or I think to create immortality, wasn't it? I think they were after, and a slave. Yeah, and I like that, the old research out to control plot line, if you like, the mad scientist type thing. It's a bit of an age-old sci-fi trope, but I do like it. And I think it's a decent episode. Fundamentally, it hangs together quite well. It can be a bit slow in points, but I think it's got a good storyline. And I think it's a real Blake focused episode, really, with Callie, Blake and Callie focused episode, and I like it, to be honest. I like the initial scenes on the Liberator. There's a lot of shots of the Liberator around, a lot of good dialogue, a lot of good takes between the characters. Decimas are a bit annoying, unfortunately. I think, but I think Gila and Navarro are pretty good. I like them. They're particularly cold and emotionless. And I like the end. The Decimas are freed from this oppression. So I think, like I said, it gets a lot of flack, but I think it hangs together quite nice. And in the end, they fly back off to Kentaro again. Do they ever go to Kentaro? I don't know. But yeah. So that's my thoughts. A bit rambled, but there they are.
All right, Nick, thoughts on this episode, storyline, plotline, whatever you want to call it?
I'm with Neil there, really. It's not one of my favourite episodes, but I actually like it. I like the fact that, as Neil said, it's a single plot storyline, so they can focus on that one. And I think it's a pretty decent one, to be fair.
All right, Lynn.
You've 3 from 3, I think, so far. I was thinking exactly the same as Neil. It does get a lot of flack, and I think we'll come to special effects, right, and costumes and everything else, and I think a lot of that flack probably comes from that. So let's park that for the moment. I like the fact that all of the character interactions start developing. We've had little bits of them, and I was trying to watch it this time, imagining it was the first time you're watching it, because we've got all that character development since having watched it all. But when you look back at it, this really starts to embed some of those. I think overall this storyline is, we've got the very clear statement of Blake's conscience, irrational conscience, I think at one point was referred to, and his moral stance, though, which is very strong, and Avon's kind of logical pragmatism. If it's us or them, then why are we still standing here discussing it? So those start coming through. The point about Callie, you're right. She's barely arrived on the ship, and is acting strangely. That the part of it where you are not sure whether it's just her, right, is a lot shorter at the start of this than I imagined it. Because I thought, well, if you've only seen, you're watching this fresh. She's arrived in Time Squad. She's very quickly integrated, not to everybody's satisfaction. And now here she is, knocking out Villa and sabotaging the ship. And I imagined that uncertainty about what was driving that lasted a little bit longer than it does. I think you fairly quickly realise that she's been taken over. But it was still a nice, slightly unsettling start as well. So I agree. No Federation for the first time, and we are beyond that kind of 4-story arc at the beginning. Hangs together, and I like it actually. I think it's a good storyline, and I particularly like the character interactions and the development of those. The development of the sort of some of the antagonism, but the relationships that you see developing.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I genuinely think this episode is quite. I called it disturbing. We get off to that really creepy start. The establishment of an alien planet which is covered in webs, and I think I actually got transported back to being a kid watching this, because I remember being scared of this episode. I wasn't a big fan. I'm not scared of spiders as an adult, but as a kid, I hated them and I hated webs. So that didn't help. I think when I watched this. I was also scared of Blake's green cardigan in this, but we'll come to that later.
Rational childhood fears.
I'm often scared of clothes, Steve. Or...
Well, yeah, we'll come to that as well. But it was,
red and white stripe. I could have understood it.
Red and white tops, yeah, 100%. Yeah, like this, for example. Yeah,
that's a great. Sorry, that's a great outfit. Come on, that's
it's a full-on Sunderland strip. And anyway, yeah, for me, the tone is set right at the start, and it's just you've all nailed it. You know, it's relative now. You know, I mean, experimentation. It makes you think of lots of different things. Creating beings and testing them, and then adverse reactions from them. I mean, it's what happens in laboratories, still to this day with hamsters, rabbits, and rats. I guess this was really something which was well thought out by Terry Nation, and the storyline is really scary for a young kid. And I've got to be honest, this time round, and I think this is probably the fourth time I've watched it in my lifetime. I did get bored with it at times, and I think I always look with a director's head on it, or a producer's head on it, a writer's head on it, because I've worked behind the camera and I've worked in front of the camera. I think it could have been better in so many ways. I think the storyline again in this was, there was certain parts which I felt were added just to hit the magical 50 minutes that they had to hit on the BBC. And having read, a lot of books and a lot of interviews and in fanzines and stuff, and in Cult Edge's recent stuff, it's all about hitting the time, and making sure that things are, run to the right schedule, and it's, or not covered in the right way because they've run out of time or they've run out of budget. So it was a hit and miss episode for me in so many ways, but I love the alien planet. I thought that the interaction between the crew again, and the character building between the crew, which were praised in Time Squad, I think we lost a bit of it. I think that we lost a little bit of it in the web. There was some great interactions. It felt as if it took a while to warm up this episode. I felt as if, and I'm not sure whether that was because Callie just, we went straight into this, and Callie was a little bit, there was something not right with Callie. I hate that scene where she basically is walking along, and Villa appears and goes, "Do you like what I'm wearing?" And she turns around, and there's this like awkward like pause, and she's like looking and looking and looking, and I'm thinking, I didn't think that worked. Maybe it worked back then, but it didn't. You like that? I
like that scene actually.
I did. I thought she has a really strange and effective smile. It's clearly something not right with her, and I sort of like the fact. Maybe it's just the fact he did something a little bit different. I guess.
You know what it is?
There's a bit of a mirror then, isn't there? Because she has the long, pausey, flirty scene a little bit with Avon when he's working on.
It was the establishing of. I think it's the establishing of the fact that she's done. Like nowadays, we would be, you would head along on you'd head along on the Liberator maybe, and then something would happen which would initialize this. She just, she's gone from being all right in the last episode to suddenly now she's, been taken over. I don't think we established what had happened, and I know we find out later. But I think that's what I didn't like. I would prefer it if it had been established. Something had happened to establish that, like to go through something, or there's a bit of turbulence with the ship. I felt that was really confusing. That was all, and I think that's probably why that bit didn't seem right. And then we go. You mentioned that bit where we go with Avon. Avon's busy, busy doing what Avon does. He's looking at various things and
forward detector links.
Forward detector links, yeah. And she comes along, and it's a completely different tact she takes with him. And we're going backwards and forwards with Blake and Jenna, who are, trying to find out what on earth is going on. you know, with you know, with the ship and why things have been why there are issues. But you know, that alone, then we go into, you know, the whole trip down to the planet. And I loved all that. I thought, you know, I think bearing in mind, and Dave's not here to keep saying that's another time you've mentioned budget, but bearing in mind the budget that we know they were working on, I think they did a fantastic job dressing up, you know, wherever this location was as an alien planet. And I think it was fantastic. It was fantastic. And I genuinely think watching that, where, you know, it really just set the scene, and I can see why I was worried about it as a young child. The interactions between Blake and Avon were really good in this. We really did set out the relationship, I think, in previous episodes, but it's becoming more apparent now. You know, with various things that are being said between the two of them, that Avon clearly is an alpha male and sees the day that Blake won't be there, and we're getting that already. You know, I mean, the signs are already there. You know, he's making his play for that ship. And he's making his play, and he's telling him he's nobody's boss. He'll go along with things that Blake wants to do, but there's a reminder virtually in every episode. And there's a couple of reminders in this. I'm not your skivvy. Other people might be, but I'm not. So I love that, and that was, you know, that was there for everybody to see again. I think the aliens in this as well are, you know, getting down onto the planet, and the decimers. I mean, it's a hell of an undertaking to have so many, for starters, bearing in mind, you know, again, the budget that they had for the series to have that many. But then, you know, they had to dress them all, costume them all up. And I just thought the interaction between, and the difference between the people inside the silo, inside the silo and outside the silo, I thought was great. I did giggle, of course, when I saw our little friend in the tube. But you know what? It was believable. It was good. It was a good. You know, I didn't let that spoil it for me. I loved the way that it worked, and I thought that the rest of it was fine. It was just that initial start, I think, that put me off. The only other criticism I'd have is it seemed to be rushed at the end. We seem to have a big rush at the end, you know, again, and suddenly they're off to Kentaro that Neil mentioned. I thought it could have been a lot tighter, and I think they would have looked at that episode in hindsight and gone, we could have corrected this, we could have corrected that, you know, but it's time restraints and budget restraints again, and that's it. But overall, I did enjoy it. You know, it was ahead of its time, I think. And I think nowadays, if you did something like that, it would be, you know, it would be fun. It would be fantastic. I think if you did a remake of that episode, you know, with everything that we've got now to do, I think it would be fantastic. But overall, yes, I enjoyed it. We'll have our marks out of 10 at the end of the show, as we normally do. But yeah, I think a resounding yes from everybody on that. As I said, I'll give Dave's opinions right at the end. He's done a small video, and then I've got a few words to read out.
It was ambitious, wasn't it? I think it's an ambitious ask, this episode, I think, of the resource restraints that we've got. I avoided budget there. I just said it. But I think it was ambitious.
Budget all night because Dave's not here.
Maybe naively ambitious, perhaps.
Yeah. I would say. I think definitely. I mean, because it's, you know, just everything that's in this. They've crammed a lot into it, and the man who was given the job to basically direct this was Michael Edwin Bryant, who joined the BBC at the ripe old age of 21 as an assistant floor manager in the drama department, and then became a production assistant, and quite often just credited as Michael Bryant, but went on to direct some great shows on BBC, such as Z-Cars, Doctor Who. He took charge of John Pertwee and Tom Baker in 6 series of Doctor Who. He then went on to do the Sea Devils, the Green Death, so Death to the Daleks. He did Revenge of the Cybermen, Robots of Death, and then appeared in 1978 in Blake 7. He also did my favourite Second World War show, Secret Army, in 78 and 79. But yeah, fantastic. Michael E. Bryan, what was your thoughts on this, on the direction, Neil, on this one?
he's got a good record in Blake Seven, as either way back, Project Avalon, Deliverance, and Aurak. I think this is possibly his weakest episode, unfortunately. I think at times it's paced a bit slow, and I think that it can lose your interest a little bit. Things tend to take a while to warm up. I think you mentioned at the start, Steve. There seems to be a bit of padding going on, running around the Liberator corridors quite a lot at the start. That seemed a bit of padding for me. Seemed a bit slow. I did like the planet, even though the base looked a bit sad, to be honest. But I did like, the going down to the planet, and I did like the premise of what was going on there. It all seemed good, and I think the direction in general is good, to be honest. I know the Decimals are a bit annoying, but he actually managed to make you feel for them characters, even though they're only little green things. I actually felt sorry for them, and I actually empathized with them, and obviously we got Blake's empathy for them coming through as well, quite strongly as well. So I think to direct them, as you've got the picture up, and get you to feel for them, I think was actually quite clever. And I think the directing of Gila and Navarro was good as well. They were particularly disturbing for me, to be honest. They had no emotion whatsoever. It's got to be mentioned, haven't it, though? Seaman is just awful. Unfortunately, the head in a pickle jar or whatever he's in. That doesn't work so well for me. But I think the direction is good. It is good. It's strong. It's unfussy. It grabs moods well, I think. And he does his best, Michael O'Brien, not to get too close up, so you don't see a lot of the poor elements of the set design and all that kind of stuff. It's all a little bit at distance as well. So I think it does well. Is my summary of it.
Okay, thoughts on the direction from Mr. Bryant, Nick?
I thought overall he did a good job, but I think the thing I would have particularly changed, if you look at a lot of sci-fi films or horror films, they try to hide the monster or the alien or whatever it might be until far later on in the show, so to build the tension so that the great reveal is more spectacular. Now, it might well be that the great reveal of Samon, he realised was going to be crap, so he didn't. He thought he'd just get it over and done with. But he's revealed in the first minute, and so I think a lot of potential tension there was completely lost and dissipated, where he could have built that to a far later point in the show. Just use his voice early on, as they were doing, and then ultimately revealed him towards the end. So I didn't understand the point of revealing him so early. It just seemed a bit like an own goal to some degree. I thought again, going back to action scenes, there was a point where early on Callie knocks out Villa, and again, action scenes are stuff I like, but she throws this blow and it stops on his head and it knocks it. Yeah, and anybody that's thrown a punch, you hit through a target, not just stop it on it and and the resultant effect. So again, that I thought could have been done a little bit better. And there was something else I'd made a note of in my notes, and I can't see where it is off the top of my head.
We'll come back to it if you.
Okay. But yeah, I thought overall he did a good job, but the reveal of Samon was an own goal. The early reveal of Samon was an own goal.
I kind of took it that it was revealed early to establish that there was some other entity there.
Yeah,
that's the way that I took it. But I think because it's no good. Let's be honest, Seaman's no good. Showing it at the start, you're right, Nick. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, and you're right about showing. There was clearly some, as you say, another entity somewhere. But because they opened, they had all the pieces about the lab. That's fine. We're dealing with science here and whatever's going on. Then you get Navarra and Gila, and they could have been projecting that because they're lying on their couches, aren't they? as you say, yes, you know they're not speaking, but clearly this isn't audible at this point in that way. So you could have kept that pretense, if you like, for a while, that it was them, or that uncertainty. Is it these two who are projecting this this voice and this effect? Which would have been twofold, wouldn't it? You keep that going and the uncertainty of anyone else who's there, and you don't reveal Saemon, who I believe from Jonathan and Graham's production series A Bible, they said that it was not Terry's vision for Saemon did not pan out, and I'm not sure what reason, but they had to put something together quite quickly. And that just didn't work. But yeah, could have been revealed later. We've talked about that first scene that I quite liked, the weirdness with Callie, and the fact we went straight into it. I kind of liked the uncertainty, but I think that's just, as you said, it's how it takes you at the time, right? The ending did all happen all of a sudden. I actually missed a bit. And one of you can maybe help me here. We understand that there wasn't enough power to do everything. And if you lost Saemon's life support, then Navarre and Gila would die, and everything would stop. They repowered with the 2 recharged crystals. He fired the fungicide beam. The Decima started ripping everything up. And at that point, there seemed to be a problem. Now, I didn't see where there was any loss of power. I didn't see Avon grab one of the power cells, for example, in order to trigger that. I couldn't work out quite what triggered it. Smashing up the lab shouldn't have been enough. And that bothered me at the time. You know, talk about, I guess, things taking you out of what you're watching. It seemed a little shame that I just couldn't tell why that had happened. But I love them smashing stuff up because they really were. Yeah. And that's certainly what they were just told, you just destroy it all. We're not using it again. Off you go. And that at least worked. And we didn't get a comedy ending either. That was the last bit. Yes, it was all rushed towards the end a bit, but the very end, it was just that piece about change. And yeah, off they went to Kentaro. But there was no sitting around discussing what had just happened. So I liked the fact he'd done that. We did not need to see Gareth Thomas buttoning up his green knitwear.
No, we really didn't.
We didn't need to see it unbuttoned to start with, and we definitely so that has that put you off the green knitwear? Maybe I don't know.
Well, we'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Under costumes, maybe.
I'm trying to remember what. I'm trying to remember what did happen to them. That power. What?
I know.
I didn't like that bit, and that was the bit I was.
Someone will tell us.
That was the bit I was alluding to at the start about the delay. I thought that the bits that Michael Bryant got wrong were I got the feeling he just didn't know how to handle the Decimas. I think right at the start, and I mean we don't chronologically know, and I'm sure Graham, if he'd been here, might have been able to tell us. I'm sure somebody on the production side would know, but I'd love to know the order that was filmed in, because it felt very much to me as if it was filmed chronologically, and it felt as if he didn't really know what to do with the Decimas at the start, but by the time it came to the end, he had a clear idea what to do with them. So I agree with Lynn. I think the smashing up of the lab was fantastic. I thought it was very genuine. It was actually quite disturbing watching these little aliens run around, smash up this laboratory, and they were quite violent, and vicious, and the noise was quite scary. But I thought the initial stuff where they're outside the compound was horrendous. I mean, some of them were like, they weren't really putting the effort in. It almost felt as if there'd been stuff left in the episode which should have been edited out. We didn't get that. We can't go back to film this. They needed to be more aggressive. And Blake and Gila and Navarre are standing at the window, and they're looking out, and I'm thought, well, you're not going to flinch at that, because they're just tapping on the window. It didn't seem genuine. I loved the emotional bit where obviously they zapped one of the Decimas outside, And although that was pretty poor, you know, the special effects for that was the are what they are in those days. You know, it was like something out of a cartoon, which was awful, which will, you know, again, I'm sure we'll come to later on. But I love the emotion. I love the close-up of the Decima who had obviously lost, and we actually saw some emotion. So that was beautiful. That little cutaway was beautiful. Michael Bryant really nailed that. And I thought the awkward bit at the end where Avon and Blake are standing and they go from one room to another, which maybe this is where they were trying to establish what we think we're missing in this episode. But that didn't really work. And I just thought, well, you know, you wouldn't be... You've got all these little aliens running around, you know, they're going absolutely bonkers. You can't be sure they're not going to turn on you. You stand, you look at them for what seemed like about 2 minutes, watching them smash the place up. Then you take 200, you go less than 200 yards back over into another room. Then you come back out and watch them again. And then you go, oh, we're going to leave. So I you know, and I hate it when he goes, Blake, you know, I know he stops doing this eventually, you know, he's not going to, you know, when he goes on the communicator, we know it's you, Blake, you know, just come up. But it's, we need to come up soon. But he does that Blake thing, and then they turn round and they're almost walking when they get teleported up. And there's another thing as well. When they're teleported down to the planet, the Decima obviously had some kind of inclination that there was somebody going to arrive, because he runs off, this Decima, or she runs off. You know, the Decima runs off knowing that they're going to arrive. So yeah, listen, I think that was the whole thing for me in a nutshell. I just think he struggled with the Decimas. I thought he got it right with the actors. Other than that little bit I mentioned at the start with Callie and Villa, I didn't particularly like that, and maybe it was the you know the whole time it took, and then the inevitable slap. But yeah, overall, Michael Bryant, I thought, did a good job. But I will agree with Neil. I think out of the episodes he's done in Series A, I think this was probably his weakest. I don't like to say worst, because I think it's a good episode in general, but I think this was his weakest. Yes, Nick.
I found what the other little note was, and I don't know if this is more of a directorial thing or an editor's thing, but there's a brief moment when they're on the Liberator. What do you call it? Where they're all sat. The hell's the word for it?
On the Liberator?
Yeah, on the Liberator. And Villa's saying everyone's alien to him about Avon, and the boom mic's just visible right above his head. And again, that's the thing. They just think, well, it happens, but could they not have just reshot that or edited it out?
I had a feeling I'd seen it at one point, and maybe it was that bit, but I didn't put it in my notes. But I had a feeling I'd seen something, and that might have been it. Yeah. Go on, Lynn,
made me laugh.
It's only a brief thing. It's only half a second or whatever.
When Blake was running and he skidded on the floor like a kid, like I used to do in the supermarket. That made me laugh. I don't know whether he did that on purpose or whether he nearly slipped and fell. I'm not sure.
That was a bit. I did look. Actually, I double checked because I'd read it earlier, Steve, when you were talking about how it was shot. The location work was done first, and then the studio work. And they were interleaving it. You know how they worked? They had everything compressed. So they were interleaving it with Time Squad at the beginning, and possibly even a bit of Cyclocate Destroy towards the end. And they had, you know, a couple of people who couldn't be in one of the rehearsals because they were out on location. So they were swapping around all the time. But you're right, all of the early stuff outside in the forest was all done in Black Park first.
Well, there we go. Thanks for looking for that. Doug Hall, welcome to the chat. He says, I've started watching this, Steve. I've had other things to do at the time. He says, the show hid the lack of special effects with excellent characters and writing. Thank you for that. And pleased to say we've got 236 watching live tonight on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and on YouTube. So thank you. If it's the first time you've watched it, you've only got a few episodes to catch up on. We are available as a podcast on all podcast providers as well. But if you don't mind, go to the YouTube channel, The Word on Blake 7, and hit the subscribe button. We do this show intermittently. We try to do at least 2 a month if we can. But it is down to time that we can all spare to come on and do it. But we love watching the show. We're all fans of the show. Dave, who is yet to be convinced, is having a week off, but he will be back. Don't worry. And yeah, we all give a balanced view, I think. So moving on, Neil, let's move on from the direction of this, and let's talk about special effects, which is something that we love to talk about with Blake Seven, because I think in most people's minds who watch Blake Seven or know the word Blake Seven, they go, oh, that's just like Crossroads in space, isn't it? But yeah, they took on a lot in this episode, Neil.
They took, like I said earlier, I think it's a bit ambitious, to be honest, with the resources that they've got. And I think that there's a long list of special effects that aren't very special in this episode, unfortunately. We'll start with the prod of the Decima. And you know, that just looked terrible, to be honest. So that's not a great one. The Liberator flying through candy floss, just... yeah, that, you know, for the end, when the Liberator's finally released, just for that little bit of candy floss to be obviously just lifted off it, that was just terrible at the end. You know, that was meant to be the big, oh look, the Liberator's free, and that was how they did it. That was awful. The beam letting the Liberator go free at the end looked pretty unspectacular as well, to be honest. However, yeah, I said the worst special effect is that cotton wool at the end being lifted off the Liberator. It's just shocking, to be honest. And there's way too much of my pet hates the Liberator flying through animated space. There's way too much of it.
I think this is the worst episode for this, Neil. I hope I am right. Because surely they didn't use this all the way through.
It does go away. I can't remember when it goes away, but it does go away. And in terms of best special effects, unfortunately, I haven't got one written down. I haven't got one written down. I just think, well, you're doing better than me, you're doing better than me. And of course, if you count Simon as a special effect, I mean, it's just...
Unfortunately, I couldn't download a photo of Simon, so if you wanted...
Fortunately or unfortunate.
Yeah, if you just Google it, anyone watching, Google Simon, Blake Seven, Series A, episode 5, The Web, you'll be able to find who we're talking about. Nick,
are we doing costumes, or are we doing that after?
We'll do that after.
Yeah. Okay.
Nick,
for me, I don't know if it quite counts as a special effect, but if it does, then the best and the worst immediately follow each other for me. Because I thought the best effect is the very opening shots where they're going through the forest up to the base. I thought that looked really good. I thought it looked atmospheric, and I thought it was great. And then the very next shot, up to the point where they reveal Simon. So if they cut it 5 seconds earlier, it would have been fantastic. But then the very next shot is that animated shot of the Liberator flying through space, which I just thought looks a bit naff. I actually don't, having watched Doctor Who all my life, a Decima getting electrically executed doesn't really bother me. I just took it as it was. So yeah, that didn't particularly flag in my head as being dreadful. Or the candy floss in space either. I just accepted it for what it was.
The web looked a bit better earlier, but for the big end, or the Liberator's now free, the web had become nothing, just a little bit of blooming cotton wool. It was terrible.
Well, I'm used to terrible special effects, so it didn't bother me.
Yeah. I mean,
so yeah, it was the opening shot was the best, and then the scene immediately after that with the Liberator was the worst for me.
Okay, over to you, Lynn.
I'm with Nick on the forest. Just that kind of, you know, all of the draping and even the little balls and everything just makes it there's that big effort, I think, to make it look like an alien forest, right? Given the constraints they're working under. So that worked for me as well. And I right up to and Simon, they just, I know it didn't work out how they wanted it to, and that it takes away from it slightly. And I'd written, actually, I was slightly kinder, I think, than you, Neil. I'd written Webb was average, which was I don't know, damning with faint praise there, but average was about as best as I got for that. You know, all of the tech on board, all of the, you know, the explosive charge that Callie had placed, the the little probes and everything she uses. I mean, they're sort of 70s clunky. I think, we're going to get those throughout. And those are okay for me. It's just, it was of the time, I think, as much as anything else. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I can't disagree. I thought the web itself, I mean, dear me, how it was awful, but it was that grand reveal at the end, which you have to watch to appreciate how bad it really was. Again, we let ourselves down on this program with the explosive device. The explosive device that's put on the wall. Again, anything that the ship is vast. We know that the Liberator is big, and this is the second time we've managed to explore it. But whenever we go to a big room, it's always just a big room with nothing in apart from something on the wall. And when Callie goes to put the explosive device on it, we then have this. Wow, it's going to be explosive. We've got this. Big countdown. Clearly they know exactly what this device is. Avon knows, when the lights go off, you've got 3 seconds to get clear. So of course we have Avon, saving Blake's life, of course, but then it just basically goes. I mean, it's the worst bomb ever. It's the worst. It's like a gun with a bang flag coming out of this. It really.
I was going to hurt anybody. Wasn't it?
It wouldn't have hurt anybody. For God's sake.
I think Avon hurt Blake more by jumping on him prior to the bomb would have actually hurt him.
Yeah, and of course, the smashing of the lab, we all agree, was a great scene. But because they dwelled on it too much, it gave us an opportunity to see what was in the lab. And I was like, oh God, man, this is supposed to be sci-fi. It looked like they'd gone through someone's kitchen and says, "Oh, stick one of them on. Can you bring some forks and knives in? Stick it." We've been through the
scales.
It was poor. It was poor. That let us down.
Michael E. Bright's wife had been hosting a Tupperware party the night before.
Well, he might have been. He might have been. But then we had, and I loved the planet, and I think the web might not have worked on the Liberator flying off and being covered in web, but it worked on the planet. It was like, we see it outside people's houses now as part of Halloween, which we just had. But like there was, the web all over things was great. The only thing that was slightly disappointing was it looked like it was when you got towards the main silo, it looked like I thought I was going to hear KLF playing. It felt like a KLF video with the flashing lights. Or you're expecting somebody to come out with a cup of tea, who was repairing potholes.
And there was a big fan outside as well, wasn't there, for some reason?
There was a big fan. Yeah, I don't know what that was.
Yes. Well, I've got a fan in the chat as well. It's called Dave Beanie. He says, "Mind the budget's getting a hell of a lot of mentions tonight." Hey, you were supposed to be on your knees in church.
You're busy, Dave. Busy.
Yeah, Doug Hall just says that we just.
Don't be telling us you're busy and then popping up on air criticising.
He says we've just been to the Odeon to watch Star Wars not long beforehand, so it was definitely up against it. Doug, we've made that point right at the start. If you catch up with our shows, and you're right, 100%. But yeah, I'm afraid special effects from all of us has got a bit of a hammer tonight. So I don't think we can say a great deal more about that. We'll move on to costumes, and I will take the lead on this. There has been some weird and wonderful costumes already, and we're only at episode 5. I'll start with the positives. I do like Blake's costume for going down on the planet, and I like the fact that there was different colors for him and Avon. And again, because of shortage of photographs on the web for the web, we've the Avon costume on board the Liberator in this. I loved it, and it's already establishing him as am I reading too much into it? It's like almost a bit of a subliminal message. He's the darker side of the crew. He's wearing black. He's wearing black in this episode, and I think there's always a little point there with Avon that he could have been Federation, with his black. He's punch on for black, but it's Blake's cardigan that's going to get the hammering for me. Like For starters, on the Liberator, they must be constantly knackered because they never sleep properly. I don't know if anybody else sleeps like this, but on this episode, not only was we're led to believe Blake was asleep and Gan was asleep in this episode, but when you went to both of them, they're both lying on what looks like a chaise longue, and they're both like this, looking relatively uncomfortable. But the worst thing was Blake had this green cardigan on. It looked as if it looked like a cardigan my granddad used to wear. I was so pleased it didn't have the little toggle buttons. It did have a zip. But the fact that he then walks lazily onto the Liberator from behind, he looked like he had a pair of grey Farrah flares on and this green cardigan. It just was wrong. It didn't look very sci-fi. It looked like he'd just been to an old people's home, robbed somebody's wardrobe and walked onto set. So for me, it was, that was the worst thing. It wasn't a good day for wardrobe other than Blake having that costume on again for going down onto the planet, and I like Avon's onboard costume, Neil. So there you go. And yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm against those kind of costumes, Neil. It gives us the shivers, that kind of costume.
Yeah, I think the bit Star Trek-y, isn't they? Them surface suits. I think to me, they're pretty good. I think I like them as well. The Decima's outfits were better than I remembered.
Yeah.
To be honest, and were they repainted Zygon outfits?
Yeah, I remember. I think Eric and Ian. I was re-listening to their Samon podcast before this, the Blake Seven in character, and they mention exactly the same thing, particularly from the back. Don't you see that sort of ridged set of bumps down the back of the neck or head? It is very Zygon.
I didn't think Gila and Navarro's outfits were very good. I thought they looked poor, to be honest. I might be on my own there, but they look cheap and tatty. Look like plastic bags, I thought. So they didn't work. But I mean, yeah, the worst outfit is undoubtedly Blake's green, whatever it was. I just
Phil says that's where my granddad's clothes went.
Yeah, exactly. And it looked like it was too small for him as well. I don't know.
It's snug.
Yeah. And a bit distressing that moment, to be honest.
Nick, anything to add on the costumes?
Well, I agreed with you, Steve, in regards to the. I wrote down the Planet Surface hoodies were the best costume.
Yeah.
I enjoyed them.
I don't
know if you count this as a costume or not. So the one I put down as the worst was Samon's costume. So is he a costume or an effect? I don't know. If he's an effect,
it's a costume. No, it's a costume. It's a costume. Yeah, I'll give you that. We'll see. It's a costume.
Okay.
Well, if it's a costume, he's the worst. If it's not a costume, then Blake's unbuttoned shirt is the.
It reminds me of the guy who used to do Bear. What was he called? The comedian, Keith Lemon. He used to do the Bear. That's what it reminded me of when I saw it again for the first time. Yeah, I'll find a picture of that while Lynn's telling us about her costumes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. The and you're right, and I'll steal a phrase from elsewhere, but yes, the color-coded anoraks, as you say, just the space anoraks were I like them, actually. You're right. I like them. And again, noted that Blake has a kind of, he has a dark green, a kind of Robin Hood type of green, which will come up again, particularly with those. I mean, we've got the big.
What?
Wow.
That reminds me of Stamen.
That's thrown me, that is.
Yes, I'm like, where was I again? Yeah, and I think that we're back to movie. We're back to Blake's knitwear, etc. The contrast, for example, to whether you like it or not, the contrast to Jenna's kind of pink, purple and all that. It's an outfit, isn't it? It's a of the 70s. It's a sci-fi costume for sure, and it's been designed like that. I thought slightly ironic. I didn't actually think that Villa's his new outfit from the wardrobe room was actually that great. I mean, I'm not sure that Callie was paying much attention. I don't think that was the reason for the thump. I didn't think it was that great, but no, like the anoraks, didn't like the knitwear. We're all there.
Okay, as always, we have a few other things to talk about tonight. Let's move on to something slightly different. I'm trying to find a photo of Seaman actually, which I could upload, because I think a lot of people will be thinking now that is Seaman, and it's quite clearly not. It's the bear from.
It might be better than Simon. I don't know.
Well, it was Keith. It's Keith Lemon, the guy who actually used to do that. Anyway, well, let's move on to best and worst actor in this. So, Neil, give us your best and your worst actor.
I think there's a number of really good performances in this one, to be honest. I think the whole episode is strong for the main cast. I think Michael Keaton finally starts to find his shoes as Villa a bit in this one, to be honest. Gan doesn't have a lot to do, unfortunately. Again, he must have about 5 lines in the entire programme, if he's lucky. But I think Paul Darrow and Gareth Thomas are really strong in their interactions in this episode, and it starts to show how that relationship is going to be. The trust thing was mentioned, and Blake is starting to show that he trusts Avon already. Avon is starting to show that he's reliant, even though he doesn't admit it on Blake. That's starting to show as well. And there's some really great lines in there that all augur well or hint to the future. And I don't know whether it was on purpose at this point. It can't have been. They can't have known Gareth was leaving after season 2 at this point. But the lines that are there, that his change is inevitable, was put in there. There'll be a time when he won't be making the decisions. Looking at it now, you go, it sounds like they knew what was going to happen, but they didn't. But it all works well. I think if I had to be asked for one performance in this show, I think it's Gareth Thomas, to be honest. I think is the strongest actor in this episode. The weakest one, I know it's not much of a part, but it's going to be Richard Beale as Seaman. I thought
I found him.
Oh, you have.
I thought the voice effect didn't do him much justice, I don't think.
Not the best of pictures. There it is. There is the picture.
Just about.
There wasn't much scope in the character, probably, so it's pretty difficult to judge the performance. But it's pretty difficult to deliver in a role where you're just a head in a pickle jar. But yeah, he was the worst for me. I just want to put a mention in for Gila and Navarra. I think it's Anya Marson and Miles Fothergill. I think they did really well in their roles, to be honest. They did freak me out. They would have freaked me out when I was younger. They were so cold. So yeah, I think in general the acting in this episode is pretty spot on, to be honest.
All right, Nick, best and worst actors in this episode.
Okay, well, I also thought it was a good one for most of the crew. So the one I thought fell short. So the worst actor I thought was David Jackson as Gan, just with one particular line where the Liberator is repairing itself after Avon's blown a bit up, and Gan spurts out, "That is fantastic." And it was dreadful line. Or the way he delivered it was a dreadful line. In terms of best actor, I'm a bit torn here, because I think, echoing what Neil said, Gareth Thomas and Paul Darrow were both great. I did like Miles Fothergill, though, as Navarra. I thought his voice, well, especially, it just occurred to us this morning when I was watching it, his voice is so distinctive. He was SV7 in Robots of Death in Doctor Who, which was also directed by Michael E. Bryant. I think that predated this episode from memory, I think. And the way these things work, the director often has a big say in who gets cast. So I suspect that helped him get this role. So I think I'm going to go for him as best actor. But I thought that Blake and Avon were both really good in this as well.
Okay, Lynn.
Yeah, no, I've written that it was Blake and Avon, and the way that Gareth and Paul built that, continue to build that relationship. But those interactions between the two, I think, really worked best for me. I will give a slight shout out to Sally's lip syncing for the for the takeover. I mean, it's really good. You do get that, you kind of you go with it, because I thought that was pretty sharp. But yeah, the two of them, I've got to pair it up. And I also struggle to find a worst as such, because you say everyone else was doing a pretty good job. And I think, yeah, trying to voice Samon with those, I think it's probably fair that you can't quite have the impact that you might want.
It's not much of a role now, and I said
not much to work with, and possibly really uncomfortable as well, given that it's all on the floor. But that's I don't think, for me, no one stood out as being really bad or particularly as a bad performance. And yeah.
Okay. I would agree. I mean, I thought I think the performances of
it looked great as well. Yeah.
Gila and Navarra, were quite good. I thought, Anya Marson and Miles Fothergill did do a decent job. And as always, I tend to Google these people before we talk about them. In no particular order, Richard Beale, who was stuck in the pickle jar, is agreed. What an esteemed actor! 111 credits. I'm not going to go through them all, but I mean, he did so many great things up until 2005. He was involved in Teachers, Casualty, The Bill, big shows, Poirot, EastEnders. Bergerac, all of those kind of shows you would expect to see an actor in. On the complete reverse of that, Miles Fothergill only had 4 credits. Blake 7, 4 episodes of Doctor Who, 4 episodes of Breakaway, and 4 episodes of The Olympian Way. And then,
I think he's more a stage actor, wasn't he?
Yeah, lots of stage work.
Yeah, so not the TV credits that that many others had on Blake 7. So yeah, strange, but yeah, I thought they both did well. I think, genuinely speaking, I could have put this in costumes, and I couldn't find a picture of Gan in sunglasses. I did Google it, but I thought David Jackson. I mean, as if life wasn't bad enough for him on Blake 7 by not giving him any lines to have, and his character gradually going down the pan. They then get him to wear a pair of Roy Orbison sunglasses at one point in the episode, which, like, for no apparent reason. And then he puts them on.
No reason. Yeah.
And then he puts them on later on again, and he's like looking through them as if he's like doing some kind of experiment. But I felt so sorry for David Jackson. I almost felt like giving him the sympathy vote, because it's so difficult being an actor with so little to do. When everybody else is around you is doing so much, But yeah, you can't get past. You can't get past the performance again of Gareth Thomas and Paul Darrow. Special mention to the Decimers as well. We had Deep Roy, Gilda Cohen, Ismet Hassam, Marcus Powell, Molly Tweedley, and Willie Shearer. That was your Decimers. That was your Decimers. So congratulations to them for pulling it out of the can. I mean, I thought the performances of the Decimers was believable. As I say, the emotional side outside, and then the smashing up of the internals was fascinating. And look, I mean, there's some wonderful photos. You'll be able to find them elsewhere. Certainly in the production guides that Cult Ledger brought out, of the Decimers having a little bit of time out with their masks off. No mean feat to actually go inside something like that and pretend you're an alien. So well done to them. But I'm going to give it a Gareth Thomas this week. I think, as people will find, I am a Paul Darrow fan, but I will give it a Gareth this week. Despite the green cardigan, it didn't affect his acting, and once again, just really good stuff from Gareth. But solid episode from the crew again, and onwards to the next planet. Kentaro, of course. Again, so we come to line of the episode. Good script writing, Neil, as always in Blake 7. Not as many cutting lines and key lines today, but it'll be interesting to see what you lot have come up with, and whether we've managed to get anything different. Over to you first, Neil. You've got the opportunity to go first.
Yeah. There's a line that I liked that made me giggle when Blake's Blake's response to Zen when he asks how the malfunction on the ship came about, and he goes, "If the ship is blown up, lofty disinterest won't save you." I really like that line, and it was delivered really well. There is these lines going on between Blake and Avon throughout it, hinting at Avon. I've already hinted at it, that Avon is looking to take over or whatever. The change is inevitable when he's talking to Gan. Has a really big meaning when you look at the show as a whole. We don't know now, but it does. And also, there will come a time when he won't be making the decisions. Is interesting as well at this stage for the same reasons. That's really the lines. These are what you wanted to protect. Was hugely cynical from Avon when he was talking about the Decimers. Is that it? Is that what you wanted to protect? And Blake delivers really well. They're fighting for their lives, but then you get the cut in, aren't we all? Which kind of shows Avon's disdain again for Blake and his ideals, and that Avon clearly feels that these wild adventures that Blake is taking them on are putting them at risk. I think that's what it's hinting at there, to be honest. And that's probably my best lines in the show. That little interaction there, I like that. So that's the ones for this show.
Okay, Nick.
I have a different one.
Go
I did
on.
like Neil. I did like the there will come a time when he's not making the decisions one, because that does sort of preempt things that come later on. So it shows a bit of sort of patience and foresight on Avon's part. But the line I've plumbed for this time round is when they're all sort of rushing off the flight deck when there's trouble going on, and Jenna shouts at Avon, "We're all in it, Avon," and he shouts back, "Yes, aren't we?"
Yeah.
Yes.
I have got that written down somewhere.
That was my favourite.
Brilliant. Lynn?
I do have a different one again. We're doing quite well. So when point at which you're right, the explosive, the little light goes off on the explosive, Blake looks blank. Avon throws Blake off to the side, lands on top of him, and Blake sort of looks. I think he says why or what happened, and Avon just says it was an automatic reaction. I'm as surprised as you are.
Yeah,
I love that, and Blake actually says, "I'm not surprised."
Yeah.
But that piece I love. Yeah. Automatic, I saved you before I could think about it. It was a surprise to me too. I thought it's a very Avon line. So that I've noted the other ones about the time when you won't be making the decisions, but that one wins it for me.
That line there, it seems to be the start of Blake trusting Avon for me.
Yes, really
Yeah.
early on, isn't it? We're a long time from, for what it's worth, I've always trusted you. It's a long way from that, but it's foreshadowed for sure. Yeah.
Lynn, that was one of my lines that you picked, but I'm always prepared. I had a couple others. I'll give Villa a decent line. When Zen is talking about the star system being largely uncharted, Villa goes, "Oh, that's marvelous. We're not sure where we are, but if they were sure, they wouldn't know where it was anyway." which is a great bit of writing for Villa.
Very Villa, yeah.
I loved Avon's line again. Just another cutting line from Avon. He's always better than everybody else. All knowledge is valuable, which is just that's a T-shirt in the making. And again, we've already mentioned it, but I'll tell you a fact of life, Blake. Change is inevitable. Again, it's a wonderful line, and we've already mentioned that. So, reaching the end of the episode, I'm going to play Dave's video. Now, bearing in mind there was a slight pause at the start because he's probably stuck in some intergalactic highway, but this is Dave's.
Caught in a web somewhere.
We're caught in a web somewhere, yeah, and then I've got to read what he's put in the text. It's quite short.
Hello. Well, I thought it was a very good episode. I thought the storyline was intelligent. I thought it was timely in terms of problems we face today with artificial intelligence and stem cell technology and so forth. So from that point of view, I thought it was very good. I thought the script was good. I thought the dialogue was good, and it all went tits up when we met the Decimers.
So that was his first bit of review. He then said, I'm pushed for time. He says, so 7 out of 10 for the story. The Decimers Teletubbies spoiled it somewhat. Best acting, Blake and Avon. Worst, the Decimers. Best line, he says, lots of good ones, but it was Blake to Zen. If the ship's blown up, Lofty, disinterested, won't save you. So thank you, Dave, for taking the time out to send your comments in. Dave give it 7 out of 10. Now that is another strong score from Dave, despite the Decimers not being up to Dave's standards. 7 out of 10 is quite good. So Neil, your mark out of 10 for this episode.
It's another 7 for me. I give 7 for Time Squad as well. So I didn't think it's better than Time Squad. So I'm kind of putting a little mark on it. So I think, yeah, it's a 7 for me. So it is a good episode, this one. Once you see past
everything else that we always have to look at. Nick?
I like it. It's a positive score. I didn't like it as much as Time Squad, so I've given it a 6.
A 6 from Nick. And Lynn?
Back to the 7. I think, as Neil, I'm trying to balance. It's interesting, doing them week to week and trying not to think too much about what's to come, but still balancing. But yeah, no, I'm a 7 as well.
Okay, I went for 6. I went for 6 as well. I think just, it wasn't my favorite episode. I know that obviously there's better to come. But yeah, I thought it's a strong 6. I was tempted to go 6.5, but I'm going to go 6 as well for this one. So yeah, that wraps up things on the web. Next episode will be Seek, Locate and Destroy, which brings Via Lorimer back to the table. But thank you everyone for watching. We've had 311 people watching live tonight on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and on our YouTube channel. If you're watching on any of those other platforms, please just search the word on Blake 7 and hit the subscribe button. And Neil, whilst you're on, where can people find you on your Facebook page? What do they need to search?
Just search Vindictus Novel, and that will take you to the Facebook page, and you should be able to find the group. You can also search Vindictus Novel on X, formerly Twitter, as well.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Thank you to Lynn, Nick, and Neil. Thanks to Dave for submitting his. Thanks to you for watching. See you on the next episode. Take care.
Cheers, guys.
The word. Switch the bracelet on the word. The word. Switch the bracelet on the word. The word. Switch the bracelet on the word.